Welcome to the United States.
My name is Charles Faddis. I spent 20 years in the Central Intelligence Agency working terrorism, weapons of mass destruction, and rogue states. I've been face to face with the world's most dangerous people and ideologies, and I've come to one conclusion: that our approach to these problems lacks common sense. That's what this show is about. It's about common sense solutions to the world's most significant problem. Welcome to the United States of Common Sense. Welcome to the United States of Common Sense. And with us tonight we have Farzan Faramarzi, who is from the Human Rights House of Iran. He's a blogger, an activist for human rights inside Iran. Farzan, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for your organization to give me this time, and it's my pleasure to be with you tonight.
Thank you very much. Listen, let's start with this. I introduced you as being from the Human Rights House of Iran. What is that?
So, Human Rights House of Iran, or as it goes by RAHANA, was an answer to a need to require free circulation of information. We decided to be sound of voiceless. We tried to cover the news about what happened in Iran, and we covered the human rights news and released the reports, interviews, articles about human rights violation in Iran. Our focus was and still is on the people who abuse, and our goal is to inform other people about what's going on inside Iran.
So, look, I mean, you know, most Americans are obviously busy with other stuff. So, I mean, what is the human rights situation inside Iran? What's it like from a human rights perspective today?
Unfortunately, the human rights situation in Iran is bad. Actually, it's very bad. Right now, there is a lot of political activists, teachers, students, religion minorities, ethnic minorities, and etc. are in jails. Beyond that, the human rights situation in Iran is not summarized in prisoners or activists. Islamization program at university, dividing the major by gender, restricting the internet, are also the other signs of bad circumstance in Iran. Furthermore, put pressure on journalists. Even the journalist who works for the governmental media is very important, and it shows that this regime don't tolerate any oppose. For example, while President Ahmadinejad had a speech in New York a month ago, his media consultant was arrested in Tehran and was taken into custody.
So, look, I mean, for most Americans, you know, we kind of take freedom for granted. You know, I mean, it's a big deal if you don't feel like you can say more or less whatever you want to say. And I should add, by the way, I mean, you've only been out of Iran for a couple of years now yourself. What happens to you inside Iran if you oppose the regime, if you try to oppose these kind of measures you're talking about?
Obviously, they will capture. So, capture, torture, and sentence to jail. You know, I use the word capture instead of arrest because most of the time these opposes arrest without court order. They capture and move to temporary detention. Most of the times, this act is illegal, even based on on Iran's constitution. But this is something that happens every day, and it shows we have a government with no respect, even for its own law. You know, under the security atmosphere, government and the intelligence and security forces control the activists and any individual who act against, the regime.
So when you say torture, what are you talking about? What happens?
So I'm talking about, if you follow up with the news from 3 years ago until now, we had a lot of prisoners who tortured in the prisons in Iran. Hidden prisons like Kahrizak, which is a lot of prisoners move to this prison and they're tortured. There is a lot of people in this prison like Kahrizak or the other prison tortured by the security forces and intelligence services to say something against the movement, against their own party or something like that.
So you say that a lot of this stuff is, even by Iranian law, is illegal. Are there any mechanisms inside Iran for somebody to challenge this? Do you have any way to fight back against this?
No, there is no mechanism. You know, all the system, there is a big error on all of the system. So you cannot fix it without changing the regime. So there is something that should change from the basement.
Right, from the ground up. So can you give me, I know you guys are involved at the Human Rights House of Iran with trying to fight against all this. Are there specific cases that you guys are working on now? Specific examples you can give us of what you're doing?
Oh, there's not a specific cases. For example, I just working on the religious minorities news. I'm covering the news about the religious minorities in Iran, because I was the one who belonging to one of the religious minorities in Iran. So, and I faced a lot of discrimination because of that. And right now, I covering the news about the religious minorities in Iran. The other friends of mine covering the political, stuff, and we're just dividing, the news between us and working. Anyone works on the different cases.
So you're a member of the Baha'i faith, is that correct?
Yes, I am.
And as I said earlier, you left, I think I'm correct, only a couple of years ago out of Iran, right?
Yes, right.
So what were your personal experiences being a member of a religious minority inside Iran?
Well, my case is just not only my case, it's all the Baha'is, people in Iran cases. So I and the other Baha'is in Iran don't have a right to education. That's the big part of our problem in Iran today. So, and according to the UDHR Article 26, that's the right for everyone, regardless of religion, race, color, and etc. But in Iran, Baha'is cannot attend university and colleges because of their faith. The Islamic regime eliminates our rights. Furthermore, oppression against Baha'is is not just started with the Islamic Revolution or Islamic government. We faced violation during the time of Shah. But after Ahmadinejad came to power, the Baha'is' condition became worse.
So when you say you were denied education?
Yes.
You mean completely? You were not allowed into university? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, about the university. We cannot attend university or the colleges, but we still can attend the high school and junior high and elementary school. But in those schools, the elementary, junior high, and the high school, the students faced a lot of problems. For example, my sister faced a lot of problems during the time that she was in high school. And so, and that's the same for the other, Baha'i student in high school and, junior high or elementary school. Most of the time, the teachers, and especially the religious teachers in Iran, because we have, a kind of classes, a kind of credit about religious, and they teach the students about Islam. So these teachers say something against Baha'i faith. They always say that the Baha'is the Baha'i faith, the people who believe in Baha'i faith work for Israel, or they are spying for US. So, and that's not true, and that's against human rights.
Right. So, it's been since 1979 that the Islamic Revolution took place in Iran. And I think the United States at the time was opted for this policy to wait for this to somehow evolve. And we've now gone for decades back and forth, different policies, but somehow always with this expectation that somehow or another someday this would change, that the Iranian people would force a change, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that eventually they would wake up to what this regime has become. So what do you, as somebody who's relatively recently come out, what's the attitude of the average Iranian to this whole regime, to this apparatus?
Let me give you an example. 2 weeks ago, we had a protest against the rising cost of living broke out in Tehran's market. and police used the tear gas to disappear, the demonstrators. So this is one of the opportunities that you ask about that. So people are dissatisfied with government, and they use any opportunities. If that opportunity was writing a slogan against government on the wall. So on the other hand, people are afraid because they witnessed Neda, Sohrab, and the other people who killed in the street, who tortured, who raped, in the prison of Islamic Republic 3 years ago until now. And the worst part, I can say, there is no consensus for the leadership, between the opposition in Iran and outside of Iran. And that's the major problem right now. But the people inside of Iran use, any opportunities. I told you, the protest against rising the cost, or writing a slogan on the wall, or participating in Facebook and, the social networks, and acting against regime, by spreading the information, spreading the news.
So I know that the Iranian government actually has indicated some awareness of the internet. In fact, they talk periodically about the idea that they want to cut themselves off from the internet, presumably because they regard it as a source of bad information from their perspective. How much impact does the internet have inside Iran?
Too much, too much, because, the Iran has, very young population, and the young generation know how to use technology. They really like to communicate with the world. And I want to refer you to New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof, who had a trip to Iran on June 2012 and wrote about his trip in New York Times. So he had a, I can say, awesome experience in Iran. And that's a really good reference. That's not me talking in, inside of Iran. That's an American journalist talking about situation of Iran, and that's a really good, point of view for the Americans who wants to know about circumstances in Iran.
So, when people talk about places like North Korea, they often reference, I don't know how completely true this is, but the idea that North Korea is so cut off, that North Koreans don't know that we ever landed on the moon. In other words, they're completely isolated from the rest of the world. To what extent does the average Iranian know what's going on? How much are they getting information from outside, or are they cut off as well?
No, they didn't cut off. The Iranian government tried to do the same thing as you told that has happened these days in, the Korea. So, but the Iranian young, almost the young people in Iran use the anti-filter, use the VPNs, use the proxy sites to access to the free internet. We had a news a month ago that Iran's regime tried to ban the Gmail in Iran. So, but they couldn't. It's impossible to ban Gmail because 99% or I cannot say the percentage, but a huge population in Iran use the internet, use the Gmail, and they have a Gmail account. So it's impossible, to ban the Gmail in Iran or to ban the other services like Facebook and Twitter. I have a lot of friends in Iran in my Facebook, and they are from Iran. They post a lot of video from YouTube, from the Twitter. So and it shows that they can access internet.
In the course of my career, I spent a lot of time working Iranian matters, which means a lot of times working against Iran. I don't mean against the Iranian people. I would like to think for the Iranian people, but against this regime. And I think anybody who knows Iran also knows the history of the country. He knows the history of Persia and the Persian people and the greatness of the civilization. And it's a shame. I mean, it is a crime that you have a country that's that great, with that kind of history, held hostage, if you will, by this government. So, back to a question that I kind of touched on a little bit earlier, which is, this regime, this Islamic regime, has been in place since '79. What are the prospects
for change? I mean, what are the chances that we're going to see change from inside Iran anytime soon?
So, as I said before, it's really, the Iran's case is really complicated. And we have to consider about that. We had Islamic Revolution experience in Iran. And, the Iranian people remember the Ayatollah Khomeini deceptive promises. But what happened to those promises? So the people in Iran just kind of afraid. If this regime overthrown, what the next regime look like? They're just afraid. Because we had a really bad experience with the last revolution in Iran. So, and that's the real the major thing that we have to concern about that.
Well, do you think there's a realistic chance that the Green Movement, I know you're not a member of that yourself, but does the Green Movement have a chance of actually overthrowing this regime?
Well, I don't want to say something just on top of my head. I don't want to just make a guess.
Right.
It's there is a lot of function here. If Iran and the U.S. start negotiate and reopen the embassies in their countries, or if U.S. stop sanctions, or if Iran stop the nuclear program, and then each of these cases can completely change the situation. So that's so complicated. But the major thing is that the Iranian opposition, there is no leader which is acceptable for all these groups. That's the major part.
So at this point, we don't have a united opposition that could really make that change happen.
Yes, exactly.
So you touched on it a little bit, but let's talk about it directly. I mean, here's the situation. Obviously, the United States has a lot of interests for a lot of reasons. What should the U.S. do? What should our policy be? What actions should we take?
That's a really great question. The U.S. and the European countries can help Iranian people by covering the news and do the public awarenesses to help people in Iran, to tell them, to help them to access to the free internet, to the satellite and stuff like that, and secluded Islamic agent of Iran in the world. And by agent, I mean even the Iran's president. That's my question in personal. Why U.S. gave almost 120 visas to Iran's commission for UN General Embassy's meeting? Why every year U.S. media and press interview Ahmadinejad? Why U.S. let him to spread his lies? Why U.S. let him to misuse freedom and democracy and say everything against humanity? So help Iranian people. Do not bomb my country. Just help the Iranian people.
Okay,
help us to.
I'm sorry. So what you're saying, what you're alluding to here is you're talking about Ahmadinejad coming to speak to the UN, saying we are in effect giving him a platform, a voice by letting him do that.
I disagree with that. Iran's regime banned all the satellite waves in Iran by sending the noise to these satellites. But they have the TV station outside in Iran, even in US, in European countries. So they are a dictator, and they use, on the other hand, they misuse the freedom and democracy in the West. So, and that's my question. Why the US media is really like to do the interview with Ahmadinejad? Are they doing the interview every year with the other presidents of the other countries? Or it's just for the Ahmadinejad?
Right.
Why they let him to say his lies?
Right. Okay. So you made reference, I think, there, before I jumped in on you, to the fact that we should not take military action against Iran. We should not bomb Iran.
Yes, of course. And my reason is, look at Libya, for example. Look at Libya. What's happening in Libya? Are they reach democracy? They killed the U.S. ambassador.
Right.
Why they did that? You know, that's not the good thing. We cannot reach peace by war. That's not the, you know, the very you know, the very good, you know, way to reach freedom and democracy. That's not the, you know, the best option. The best option is helping to people by, you know, to change their own government, to access, you know, the free information, free internet, to awareness the world what's going on in Iran.
What about sanctions? What about the economic sanctions, the financial sanctions? They help? They hurt the Iranian people more than the regime? What do you think?
I think sanctions, you know, put the pressure on the people's shoulder. You know, the Iranian regime, the Iranian government, the Iranian regime, it is still fine. If they doesn't, they would you know, they start, you know, negotiations with U.S. or you know, start stopping the nuclear program. But they didn't. But the people in Iran, you know, most of the pressure of the sanction is on the shoulder of the people, and that's not really. If the sanction focus on the government, that's fine. But right now, you know, most of these pressure of the sanction are on the people, not on the government.
Farzan, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. It's really, really fascinating. I look forward to talking to you the next time, because I think you got some great insights on what's really going on inside the country.
Thank you so much, and that's my pleasure. I'm glad to see you.
And thank you for tuning in to the United States of Common Sense on AND Magazine.